Gender and the Union is a podcast exploring why policy changes matter in combating gender-based violence in the European Union, and why relationship and sexuality education is key to creating a more equal and safe future for all. In this 4-episode podcast series, we will create a dialogue between policymakers in the EU and the young people looking to advocate for positive change. Hello again, and welcome to another episode. My name is Catherine Bailey Gluckman. I'm a Programme Advisor for Youth at IPPF EN, and I'm here once more to discuss what the European Union and all of us can do to fight inequalities and prevent gender-based violence. Joining me are Leonetta Pajer, Head of Operations at the EU Delegation to Serbia, and Gala, our youth activist from Serbia. Leonetta has been Head of Operations for the Section for Justice, Home Affairs and Social Inclusion at the EU Delegation to Serbia since March 2019. Before this, she was part of the team in Brussels focusing on the accession of Serbia to the European Union, covering capacity building financial assistance to Serbia and the response of the EU to the migration and refugee crisis along the Western Balkans route since 2015. She has spent the last 11 years working with the Western Balkans, focusing particularly on Serbia. She is married and has one child. Gala is 16 years old. She's a high school student in Belgrade. Following her interests in human rights and women's rights, she started volunteering at the Serbian Association for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. That's IPPF's member organisation in Serbia. As a peer educator on sexuality, her job is to raise awareness on the importance that sexuality education has for all young people, regardless of gender. She's also engaged in governance in the organisation. She became a member of the Executive Board in December 2020. Thank you both very much for joining us today. Now, Serbia is a candidate to become a member of the European Union. The accession negotiations, as they are called, are currently ongoing. Gender equality and combating gender-based violence are key priorities for the European Union. Leonetta, can you tell us how are these priorities reflected in the negotiations with Serbia?
Good morning, Catherine. Yes, gender equality is not just a moral obligation for the EU, but it's an imperative for economic growth, prosperity, good governance, peace and security. It is a core value of the EU and a universally recognized human right. Human beings at their diversity should be free to pursue their life, to thrive socially and economically, and to participate and lead equally in their society. COVID-19 pandemic has also been a wake-up call for gender equality in Europe and in the whole world. In countries across the world, lockdowns to contain the coronavirus led to spikes in domestic violence reports, but also on women unemployment. While it will take time still to fully understand the consequences that COVID-19 had for gender equality and is having for gender equality, it's clear that it poses a serious threat to the fragile achievements made all over the past decades. In the context more closer to the European Union, the EU has launched last year its gender equality strategy 2020-2025 and highlights issues of disproportionate effect of digital technologies, work-life balance, an equal share of care responsibilities, as well as focusing externally on green and digital transformations, which are the priorities of this Commission for the next 4 years. With the adoption of the new EU Gender Action Plan number 3, 2020-2025, GAP3, so-called, the EU has reaffirmed the centrality of gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment throughout the EU external action at all levels and in all sectors. Freedoms of all forms of gender-based violence is one of the 6 strategic policies of this Gender Action Plan is trying to tackle. The EU has reconfirmed its commitment that at least 85% of all new external actions will have gender equality as a significant objective of 2025. This is a major commitment of the European Union in making the gender equality really mainstreamed among all the work that the Commission does in and outside the European Union. And the key step in this process is a mandate that all the EU delegations, including ours, have that is the preparation of an updated gender country profile and country-level implementation plans, covering all the 6 areas of intervention identified by the Gender Action Plan. Of course, Serbia is part of this process, as all the countries in the Western Balkans. And in this context, we have organized, and we are still continuing, a number of consultations with international organizations, with member states, and also for the first time with civil society organizations, and in particular women's organizations and those working on gender equality. Our plan is to finalize such country profile by the end of the next month, by the end of July. And we are really, really appreciative of the inputs we have received so far from all the interested civil society organizations, as well as the inputs received for our annual report that we do on each country of in the accession process every year. In particular, because the inputs of civil society for the European Union is crucial in countries like Serbia, where segregation of data is not yet fully there. And the civil society organizations are those that are providing us such information. And a crucial example is the number of feminicides in the country on a yearly basis.
Thank you very much for that overview. Despite these many careful plans, efforts on many sides, and some meaningful progress, as you mentioned there, Leonetta, between the last 2 assessments carried out in 2016 and 2018, Serbia is still only scoring a 55% rating on the European Institute of Gender Equality's measuring instrument. This indicates that women in Serbia still have markedly lower chances of being in good health, of participating actively in the labour market, or of having access to similar levels of education as men do. Last December, the EU did decide not to open any new chapter in the negotiations with Serbia because they were concerned about lack of progress in the areas of democracy, independence of the judiciary, freedom of expression, and the media. These are the kinds of areas of public life which really do affect gender equality, among other things. So it is important for us to consider the connection between progress or stalled progress on women and girls' rights and the EU putting the brakes on the expansion of Serbia's accession process for the time being. Gala, as a young activist in Serbia, how do you perceive the future membership of Serbia to the European Union, and what are your hopes for this process?
Thank you, Catherine. From what I know, I think it would be a great opportunity for young people, as it opens many doors and opportunities that are worth taking and worth fighting for. Also, I think that if our country would open to other countries in the EU, we will be able to see less unequal access to rights, like closing the gender pay gap, and we would surely advance in balancing the roles of both genders in decision-making process. It's a good thing to cooperate with other countries. We will all learn from each other, and we will learn from each other's experiences. Also, the projects, they're all beneficial for us, for young people, and for the older ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we know a little bit from our introduction about the kind of activities that you're engaged in, and we know that you're doing a variety of different kinds of work towards equal rights. Can you tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing for gender equality?
So for me, sexual and reproductive health is the key to obtaining gender equality. If both boys and girls don't have equal access to sexual and reproductive care, which include as well as relationship and sexuality education that will help them to resonate in a healthier and right way, we cannot hope to achieve gender equality. It's sad to see that women and girls are treated inferior just because they didn't have adequate support from sexuality education that should be taught in schools to more moral supports from their environment, like their families or comrades in school. They're then not able to decide over their relationship, whether and how much children they will have. violence is then more likely to occur in their relationship, as well as HIV and STI. All of those factors deprive women and future women from education, economic independence, and can cause psychological damage. Everything that I said above, they're all my motives for starting to volunteer at SRH Serbia. Me, as a peer educator, my goal is to raise awareness in my generation and generations above and beyond me, to raise awareness about how important sexual education really is. And if we don't have the right access, the right resources, and right information, we cannot, as I said, decide for ourselves. Me as a young woman, I see it as a really important thing, because if we're deprived from education, or if our sexual life deprives us for education, that could be a real problem for our country as well, because we all need young, educated people to lead our country.
Thank you very much for sharing a bit more about the work that you do and the clear relevance you see of relationship and sexuality education to all levels in society. You mentioned that protection from violence is a major motivator for you to work on relationships and sexuality education. We know that evidence is very strong to suggest that gender inequalities increase the risk of violence by men against women, and that it inhibits the ability of those affected to seek protections, even though that patriarchal norms around concealing violence mean that we can always expect figures on violence to be underreported. The most recent statistics available show that 44% of all Serbian women have experienced intimate partner violence, 42% have experienced sexual harassment, and at least 31% have experienced physical, sexual, or psychological violence before the age of 15, so during childhood. Leonetta, in your view, what can the Serbian government do to ensure women and girls lead a life free from this kind of coercion and violence?
Serbia is facing similar challenges that many of the member states are facing. The numbers you were mentioning now, which are very frightening, are actually to a certain extent not so far from a part of our own member states, which is not an excuse, but shows that the challenge is much broader, of course, than Serbia itself. The Serbian government is engaging in the area of gender equality and also tackling violence against women and girls. And the European Union is supporting the changes that have to happen, not only in Serbia, but overall in the Western Balkans. And of course, we do this because it's a natural part of the process of embracing the values of the European Union. We are working in partnership with the Serbian institutions in this respect, and we work on different levels. For example, we support the adoption and implementation of comprehensive evidence-based laws aligned with the Istanbul Convention and other international commitments, which Serbia has signed up to. We try to support the addressing of root causes of violence, working with the different communities, including with men, to change the gender stereotypes, and the social norms can be harmful to more than 50% of the population, because this is what women are in most of the countries in the world. And ensuring that essential services and support like shelters, counseling, but also housing and alternative possibilities of life are ensured for those that are threatened by violence or are anyway affected by it. And also enhancing the capacity building of all the judicial and justice sector, including judges, prosecutors, and other legal experts, to receive specialized training to improve women's access to protection and justice. And also, I mean, yesterday I was part of the Roma technical meeting that took the social part of the social dialogue that the Serbian government is undertaking in a number of areas. And in this sense, also, we keep working with the Serbian authorities on inclusion of Roma girls in education, which help empowering and help reducing exposure to violence. But also we keep monitoring the efforts of the Serbian institutions on early child marriages and child labor, which of course is part of other areas where unfortunately women and girls, especially girls in this case, are the most affected. The government also has adopted strategy on the prevention for combating gender-based violence this year, a few weeks ago, mid-May. And this will also include a system of protection and support. And given the fact that protection and support is a multisectorial type of work, cooperation and coordination among the key actors is essential, and we expect the Serbian authorities to act accordingly. Of course, there are two other pieces in terms of legislative aspects that Serbia still has to work on, which is the new law on gender equality and the law on amendments to the law on prohibition of discrimination, which are in the parliament now. And those are, of course, part of the fundamental rights of so-called chapter 23. So the chapter dealing also with fundamental rights, justice and anti-corruption. The last point that I would like to mention in this area, and I mentioned in your question you raised to me before, is step up the accuracy of statistics in terms of better segregated data, more comprehensive data, because this is the key element for having better evidence-based policy, to have a better picture of what is happening in the country, and hopefully having better tools to reduce the phenomena and address them in the best possible way.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive overview of a very large number of possibilities open to those in power to improve the situation for women and girls. You mentioned there, Leonetta, the importance of making sure that there is broad access to all young people, particularly those who are most in need of the protections of education in this combat against violence. Gala, was gender-based violence something that you were able to discuss at school? Did you have access to relationship and sexuality education at school that included discussions around violence?
So personally, in my school, I had sexual education that covered most of the content from a biological point of view to discussing gender equality, stereotypes, and so on and so on. But that is when I noticed there was a problem. I noticed that boys didn't have a realistic point of view on what sexual education really is, what sexual health really is. And that is not their fault. It's the fault of their parents that were ashamed to talk to them about it or thought it wasn't important at all to talk about it. They all went by the fact, oh, they're still young, they have age. But no, 8th grade is a perfect time to start talking about it. And I think that is the most important thing to talk about with your parents, because it's an intimate thing. Also, looking at my other peers that were in national schools, they didn't have access to sexual education at all. They just knew about biological processes, but nothing about the contraceptives or the complications of sexual reproduction and the diseases as well. They didn't know anything about it. So that is also the problem, because professors are also ashamed to talk about it, which I find really sad, because with the lack of education, the stereotypes and the disbalance in gender equality gets more important. and we cannot fight it without educating our kids. That's why me as a peer educator, I really tried to bring that topic more and more often to the stage. I try to talk to my peers about it. I try to relax them in order for them to see that that is nothing strange to talk about it, and that you should talk, you should ask your parents about it. They went through all of it. It's better to be prepared and to know what you're dealing with from the early age than to come into a situation where you don't know what to do. Or girls, they are ashamed about their bodies, which is also for me sad, because then in the relationship they will back down, and because they didn't have the right access to education, they won't be able to fight for their voices. That's when, as I said in the previous question, that's when violence occurs. That's when other problems occur. That's where the mind and the emotions also step into the game, and they also can be harmed. That's why I think that we should really insist on sexual education in school from the early age, just to try and relax kids, to see that that is nothing dangerous to talk about.
That's such a good point, Gala, making this connection between shame and violence. You've said there how important it is to break through taboos, and it's the responsibility of adults, educators, decision makers to make sure that that shame is dismantled for young people, to ensure that young people of all genders, as you said, and all ages have access to comprehensive relationship and sexuality education, and that it should go well beyond biological facts and also include discussion of gender norms and consent and all aspects of emotionally healthy, intimate, and wider societal relationships. Thank you very much. Can you tell us a bit about how young people's voices from Serbia are being included in the negotiation process for EU accession, Gala? Is that something that you're aware of?
I don't know young people's voices are included in the negotiation, but what I could say is that the negotiation process would be made much easier if the young would step up, if we would really initiate on that coming out. We should really fight for it, because so much opportunities will come to us by joining the EU, so much resources for education. It will solve and make easier most of our problems. Of course, not all problems will be solved, but when people cooperate, it makes everything easier, because then we have support, we have other experiences from others as well, and we can learn from them, which I think is really important. That's why we as young people, because we're the future generations of this country, we're going to lead this country. We should really insist on it being done. And that's my opinion.
Thank you. Leonetta, are you able to offer any recommendations of how Serbia can gather that enthusiasm among young people and communicate young people's opinions as part of the process?
Yeah, I think there are quite a number of aspects that can be taken into consideration to involve, because as Gala was saying, the participation of the younger generations is key, because are the future leader and those that actually will live in Serbia in the next decades, not maybe the older generations, or at least they should be the ones shaping the future. And I think there are different layers in which the youth in Serbia can make its part and actually be more involved. There is more personal levels. For example, those who are in different schooling levels can participate either in the Erasmus program. I did it myself, and for me, it's been a door opening widely on how others were doing, other countries were working, and not necessarily only EU students. I was with a lot of non-EU students as well. But also other parts of the Erasmus Plus program include work, youth associations, or high school as well as programs. which allows to see how things are done differently by your peers in EU member states and other non-EU member states, and gives you a sense of belonging to the bigger picture. And I think this is already a big part of then stimulate the interest in the younger generations to actually be part. Because if you don't see what you would gain, or anyway you would see positively, it's difficult with your reward, especially when the main news are about chapters opening, closing, which is a very technical process and has little to do with the real, impact, let's say, of on the life of citizens of the EU accession and being part of the EU itself. Also, from the side, on the other hand, of the institutions and the broader civil society, my view is that youth and youth organizations should be systematically called into the public debates that the government or other institutions call on laws, on action plans, on strategies that are going to shape the situation of Serbia in the next years, as well as youth organizations can participate in the work of the National Convention on European Union in Serbia, which is the platform recognized also by the Serbian parliament as the interlocutor when it comes to accession negotiations from the civil society side, and covers all the chapters, so all the acquis, all the process we have. The last is that more should be done in stepping up the communication through the social media that are targeting the youngsters. I'm the first year of the millennials, and I know that I look at social media that are not the same most likely that Gala looks at, because we're not so far away, but we're not so close even in age. And I think this can be, but also that the messages have to be prepared and targeted by the young generations themselves as well, because otherwise it's just they use a different mean, but with the same kind of messages, and then doesn't really work. And this will be another important way of communicating to the youngsters and actually get them involved. And the last, it's a bit of publicity as well, but we have traineeships among all the EU institutions, including our delegation calls every year for a traineeship, paid traineeship, which I did more than 10 years ago, but it's being another eye-opener, because you can see how the institutions work inside, how actually the EU is covering a wide range of social life, the life of the citizens, and allows you to get in contact with people from the 27 member states plus, and it's open to Serbian citizens and citizens of third countries.
Thank you. A nice shout out there for all the opportunities to engage in EU processes that are available to a large number of young people inside and outside the EU's borders. Meaningful youth participation is, of course, vitally important, especially on matters that, as you say, Leonetta, concern young people's futures so pressingly. It's key to recognise that young people have equal rights and responsibilities to any other citizen, and we really must make sure that they are supported to discover and understand that for themselves and to participate in decision-making spaces. And it's important, as you say, to spread awareness of these channels that do exist through youth-friendly media, to ensure that youth organisations can participate in decision-making right up to the very highest levels of national and international governance. We're getting close to the end of our episode. I have one final question to put to both of you. Gala, what is the one change in the world that you would like to see happen today to increase the impact of all the work that you are doing?
I would really love to see young women and women in all, they can freely express what they think without any barriers, without any doubt, without any overthinking about who will say what to them, what a man on the street will look up to them. I would really love to see them confident to speak up, not to be ashamed to say what they really think, because that is the way that we're going to obtain the gender equality and the mind. I want them to talk mindfully, really. And that's one thing that I would like to see in the world.
And Leonetta, what is the one action that you would like to see EU decision makers take in order to make Gala's wish a reality?
I fully second what Gala has said. And in order to achieve what we both would like to see happening in the world, the EU should make all the possible actions to see the full implementation of gender equality principles happening, also through the accession process to the EU of Serbia. And as someone said before, violence against women is not cultural, but it's criminal. And as this year we mark the 10-year anniversary of the Istanbul Convention, I really wish that before the next anniversary, we will see some tangible results in fighting violence against women, and also tangible results in moving towards full equality between women and men, boys and girls.
Thank you. What a powerful note to end our mini-series on. We have heard how gender equality, human rights, and relationship and sexuality education play a hugely important role in the accession negotiations, and how the EU and Serbia are working together to achieve a world free from sexism, violence, and all forms of discrimination. Above all, the relationship between the EU and Serbia should be a partnership that aspires to fulfill the hopes of young people like Gala. On her side, Gala has shared her expectations following the accession processes and the progress in gender equality she hopes to see in her country, as well as what she personally is doing to better the lives of young people who want access to relationship and sexuality education, and who deserve a future where inequalities are diminished and harmful gender norms are relegated to history. Quality, comprehensive sexuality education is certainly necessary to ensure that young people both expect and live out the principles of gender equality, but structural policy changes in the areas of rule of law, democracy, and health are needed too. We are now looking to both the Serbian government and the EU to make this happen, together with young activists like Gala and her peers. We had a few reminders during this episode of the existence of the Istanbul Convention as a tool to help all states proactively and concretely address gender-based violence. I strongly encourage all of our listeners to check out our previous episodes for some more in-depth discussion about the role that the Convention has to play here. This has been the final episode in our podcast series, Gender and the Union. Thank you so much to Leonetta and Gala and to all our guests. This series owes its existence to communications mastermind Cosmina Marianne. We are also grateful for the support of other IPPF EN colleagues and our partners in the Youth Spectators project. We are signing off now until perhaps a revival episode in the future. Who knows? Thank you for joining us, and goodbye. This podcast series was commissioned by the International Planned Parenthood Federation, produced by Positive Stories, and funded by the Rights, Equality and Citizenship Programme of the European Union.